in this amazing amount of cash, so make sure that someone could be you. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters. Real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's back on the agenda, HS2. Is it time to scrap it? I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think it is. The government, for some reason, doesn't. Now we've learned that those that cross the channel and get put up in migrant hotels are given surveys to see what their levels of satisfaction are. One complained there were no cigarettes in the room, poor darling. Angela Rayner takes PMQs as Keir Starmer is in Canada. We analyse her performance. Is she in some ways a more effective operator than the Prime Minister? And we find out who is the sexiest MP, with a very, very surprising answer. All of that after the news with Katie Bowen.
Nigel, thank you and good evening. The top stories at 7 o'clock. Israeli military say a fresh wave of missiles have been launched from Iran into Israel this evening. Those latest strikes come as President Donald Trump refused to say earlier whether the US would strike Iran, saying, I may not. The United States is now working to evacuate US citizens from Israel by arranging flights and cruise ship departures. And in the last few moments, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has said that the skies over Israel are open to Iranian missiles and drones. President Trump's latest intervention comes as Sir Keir Starmer chairs a meeting of the Emergency Cobra Committee to discuss the security situation in the Middle East. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says the government has deployed jets to the Middle East for the safety of British nationals and the UK national interest. Israel's Defence Minister has claimed that Iran's internal security HQ has been destroyed. Back at home, inflation eased slightly to 3.4% in May, according to the Office for National Statistics. It rose to a 14-month high of 3.5% in April after a raft of bill increases hit households. Inflation was driven last month by increased food, furniture and household good costs. Chocolate prices in the UK rose at the fastest pace on record. The Chancellor says there's much more to do, while Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride says the inflation rate is deeply worrying for families. Footage has been released which shows the British sole survivor of the Air India plane crash attending his brother's funeral. Air India have also said today that the sole survivor, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, has been discharged from hospital. He attended the funeral of his brother AJ, who died in the London-bound plane that crashed after takeoff from Ahmedabad on the 12th of June, killing at least 270 people. The chairman of Air India said today that preliminary findings from the investigation should be available in 30 days, although there were no red flags or maintenance issues with the Boeing Dreamliner. Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander has described the HS2 project and its management as no less than a litany of failure. The government has announced that the opening of HS2 will be delayed beyond the planned date of 2033. Heidi Alexander told Parliament that there's no reasonable way to deliver the high-speed railway on schedule and within budget. The project has already suffered repeated delays and soaring costs despite being scaled back. And the Princess of Wales pulled out of attending Royal Ascot today as she continues to find the right balance following her battle with cancer. Princess Catherine is said to be disappointed at not attending the famous social and sporting occasion in Berkshire with her husband and the King and Queen. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Nigel.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
I find it extraordinary that whether it's spending review announcements or budgets, we talk about cutting $1 billion here or $1 billion there. We rarely discuss HS2, which of course is costing tens of billions and forecast to cost many tens more. Well, today, this subject was back on the agenda. Now, let me be clear. I've been campaigning against this since 2010. There's a picture of me. That's me in 2015. But all through the years, I've campaigned against it. Why? Well, firstly, because it was never going to get a penny of private money. And I thought British governments are bad at doing these things. And secondly, I thought the whole thing was based on a false premise, which was if you have fast trains going to Birmingham, Manchester, maybe over to Leeds, that it would actually help take business to the north. What I'd seen with the TGV in France is the opposite. Actually, when Marseille became 3 hours from Paris, not 6, we saw firms relocating from Marseille to Paris. So I fought against it all the way through. Heidi Alexander, the responsible minister today, spoke to the House of Commons and said, look, the Tories have made an absolute mess of it. We're going to slow the thing down, but trust us, we'll deliver it on time. I asked her, how much had it cost to date?
We are not going to be a country that spends over £30 billion on rail infrastructure, but then never sees a train running on it.
So here's the argument. In business, you say the first cut is the best cut, although there are not many people in Parliament who've ever run a business or would know what it's like to take a loss. I remember when it got to $7 billion, I said, for goodness sake, scrap it. We've now, according to the minister, got to $30 billion, and yet I still think we should scrap it because I think the final cost of this will be well over, and by the way, the first estimate was $33 billion. This is going to cost 150 billion, goodness knows what it's going to be. And I think we could spend that money far better. In fact, a fraction of that money upgrading railway services all over the country to the benefit of millions of people, as opposed to some really rather well-heeled men and women going to London for the day. That's my view. I believe we should scrap it. I want your view. Please tweet #Farage on GB News or email farage@gbnews.com. I'm joined in the studio by Lloyd Russell-Moyle, former Labour MP, and Tom Pursglove, former Tory minister. But far more important than them when it comes to this question is Andrew Bruce. Good to see you, Andrew, former head of planning and performance at HS2. You know, you look through this, 33 billion. By 2013, it's going to cost 50 billion. By 2020, it's going to cost 106 billion. I mean, you were there in the 2015-16 period. How can this have gone so catastrophically wrong in terms of cost and timings?
On cost, I think back in 2015, people like myself, very experienced planners, managers, professionals, estimators, we knew how much it was going to cost. We thought the whole project would be at least 2-3 times what HS2 were telling the government.
Yeah.
In 2013, HS2 was fixed. There was a business case and an estimate of expense. For phase 1, which we've got just now, probably best to stick to those rather than the overall figures. Sure. It was about £19 billion, but that included a huge amount, $4 billion in contingency. So they really thought they could build it for about 15. As planners thought it would cost about 45 to 60 billion, and that was using HS2's own estimates.
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you for a minute there, Andrew. How, when we're talking about colossal sums of money, can a discrepancy of that size have occurred?
Well, when I was there, I saw systematic senior managers very deliberately manipulating the figures. So initially there was going to be a budget, there was going to be an estimate, that was done 2013. My area in land, for example, that estimate only covered 25 square kilometres. When I arrived in 2015, we knew we had to buy 70 square kilometres. Now, straight away, if you realise that the estimate only covers 25 square kilometres, you need 70, you've only got about a third of the budget. And that was right, we only had a third. That was the same figure, though, that Parliament were told that's all we need. And not only were they told that that's all they need, they were told that that's 95% accuracy. It was absolutely...
This is incredible. And today, another reset. Heidi Alexander at the dispatch box saying the Tories made a mess of it, and we'll come to that in a moment. But you can trust us, we're competent, we're going to get this job done. Do you have any confidence in this project at all?
Absolutely. No, they don't need a reset. They need to go back to the figures that they knew in 2015 and use those. They put a huge amount of effort with very experienced companies doing the estimates, doing the planning. They knew how much it was going to cost, how much it was going to take, but they used false figures to give to Parliament to get royal assent. And then for about 5 years afterwards, they pretended they were on budget, they were on time, there was no problem. Until really what's happened now, it's become absolutely obvious that there is a problem, but they're not looking at this. I want to use the word fraud. You can.
Well, I was about to say
false representation for something in your favour.
That saves an illegal action.
Okay. Right now they're going. Don't look at this. The big elephant in the room of potential fraud. Look at something else. Look over there. Look at Ukraine. Look at inflation. Look at Brexit. Look at bat tunnels. Look at all of these things. Yes, they add something, but there's a small percentage. It's 5-10%. What we're looking at now is 100 to 150% over and above what it originally was. So all of these things that are in the report today, and they list them all out, things that Heidi Alexander were talking about, things that the MPs were talking about, yes, they all add to the budget, but they were all known about. There was a huge contingency, nearly a 40% contingency to take those type of things into consideration.
I've said in Parliament, as I've been saying consistently, let's just scrap it. Let's just take the loss, forget about it, not spend tens of billions more. Her defence is we've spent 30 billion, therefore we have to continue. If you were in charge, what would you do?
Well, I would absolutely. Well, I would sack everybody from HS2. There's some very good people in there, but at core, the management is absolutely rotten to the core. It has been since the very beginning, because they have never admitted what they have done. They have covered it up and covered it up and covered it up. And now they're pointing to other reasons. But it's not just HS2. Department for Transport. I sat there with the most senior civil servants, face to face, telling them what the figures were. And they just watched me getting marched out the door in my shirt sleeves. And they knew exactly what was going on and did nothing about it. So it's not just you've got to get rid of everything from HS2. It's the Department for Transport and those civil servants and those ministers that knew. There's a lot of, I think, worried people that if this ever came to an inquiry, a little bit like the Post Office, people with some very difficult questions.
Such powerful words from Andrew Bruce there. Tom, you guys were in government. This finally got approved in... The concept came up towards the end of Gordon Brown's time. It was 2012 when the final approval came. What Andrew just said there's incredibly powerful, but it is the job of an elected government with a project running in... We're not talking about a few $100 million or $1 billion. A project costing tens of billions. Did nobody in the government do their homework on this?
So I have to say that when I think back over my time in Parliament, this was a project and legislation that sort of flowed from that I was always dubious about voting for. I was always sceptical about the future demand and the passenger profile, and actually this was so far into the future, as well as the fact that I rather thought, like you set out eloquently at the start, that it'd be much better to try and deliver projects in local areas much more quickly to try and generate growth and to generate jobs and all the benefit that comes from that. So when, for example, it was announced that we were scrapping the second leg, I cheered that announcement. I thought it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I welcomed the Network North proposals that then came forward that was all about Midlands and North connectivity and the various projects that I just think now we should get on and deliver. If I was challenged, I think I would come down on the side of you in saying that the better thing to do would be to scrap this, There's clearly these recommendations.
Just cut our losses.
I do think that that's probably where this is at now, because I think public have lost confidence in the project. There's all of these challenges. There's this report and the review, and all the recommendations will speak for themselves. But I personally think that we'd be better off just getting on and delivering more local projects like better connectivity in the Pennines.
So I mean, Lloyd, this is, there's some pretty serious accusations that Andrew has just made. And, to be fair, he was there at the heart of it. And when you look at the original, what we were told and what the estimates rise to, do we really think Heidi Alexander's going to sort this out?
Well, I do think we've had a history of Conservatives showing that they're very bad at managing public procurement. And Labour had a slightly better record, but not an untarnished record in the past as well. I mean, we remember the Millennium Dome, for example.
I do.
And those,
I'm not sure about PFI hospitals.
Well, PFI hospitals were produced often on budget and often well. The problem was the long tail.
Let's get back to HS2, please.
Yes, no, that's fine. On to HS2. Look, I think that the big mistake was to start in London. The big mistake wasn't having HS2, having high speed. I think we need high-speed railway, and we need to get better at building high-speed railway, and the more you build it, the more you're able to drive down those costs. And the worst thing that we do is we do one little project and then get cold feet and wait 10 years to do another little project, and you don't build any of the infrastructure up around it. Same problem we have with our nuclear power stations. We don't agree to build 4 or 5. We keep building just one at a time, and it costs more.
At very high cost.
Yeah. But if we had connected the north, you would have actually built an economic bridge between our northern cities.
But we are now where we are.
Sucks in the power.
We are now where we are.
Once you've built it, once you've got where we are, we need to pursue this to the end. We need to
whatever the cost.
Well, not whatever the cost, but we need to drive down costs. What I'm hearing, however, is actually these costs were always the real costs, weren't they?
Yeah, well, that's the point.
So actually what's happening here, and I suspect this is what happened with Crossrail, is that to get the bids, to get it through Parliament, to get public consent, people are lying about the amount it is. I would be happier if people were just more honest to say big infrastructure costs big bucks and it's worth it. And if you look at Crossrail now the Elizabeth line, the passenger numbers are beating all the estimates initially. The amount that is raining for the for Sadiq Khan and Transport for London, actually it's one of their big cash cows now, and it is working really well.
And there was a very clear need for it.
Exactly.
There was a very clear need for it.
There were people saying we should scrap that midway through, and the fact that we pushed through, thankfully, as a society and a country, actually in the end it was the right thing to do.
This has been a white elephant. Question for you, Andrew. HS1 seems to be a success.
Yes, on time, very much on budget, and it had a purpose.
And people in Kent are very pleased that it's there.
Yes.
Why did that work and this didn't?
So projects can be built on time, on budget. What you do is you employ good quality people to plan, to estimate. You have trust that those managers listen to their experts. What happened with HS2 was those experts says, you can't build it within the budget you've been given. What should have happened at that stage, and I think James Stewart says it in his thing, they went for royal assent far too early. They were not ready. And they were worried about losing the jobs, about HS2 being cancelled completely. That was the overwhelming culture when I was there. So what happened was, I think with HS1, they did their sums, they found out how much it would cost, that was accurate, and they built it for it. With HS2, they came up with a budget that was woefully inadequate. When the experts told them how much it would actually cost and how much it would take, that was dismissed. People were marched out the door. People were fired. People lost their jobs.
And you were one of them.
I was one of them. Those who stood up and were honest were absolutely devastated by HS2. It's the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life was joining that organisation. And many of the people that I still know today, completely ruined by it.
So we need an inquiry.
We need an inquiry. You were talking earlier on about should it go ahead. Now, it's 30 million already spent. Probably another 70 million to go over at least billion over the next 10 years. That's between about 7, maybe 8 billion a year for 10 years. They're saying that that is, with the country as it is today, that's a lot of money to spend. It's
a lot of money given where we are.
If they can actually finish on time, and it's very likely it won't be 10 years, it'll be 15 years.
Andrew, it's great to have you back on this subject. You are an incredible witness. Very powerful testimony. Thank you.
Thank you
for coming in. And the thought this could cost another £70 billion over the next decade. I'm sorry, this is madness. In a minute, we'll look at student accommodation that's been taken up by the government to house asylum seekers that, despite the cost of millions, has yet to be used.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome to Dunkirk. Yes, this was was described as our darkest hour. And of course, it was British expeditionary forces that had to get lifted off the beaches. And the real problem was that the big naval ships couldn't get in close enough. So these little small boats that you see, 933 of them, were called up, and they managed to evacuate most of the troops out of there over that week period. And unfortunately, out of those 933 small boats, unfortunately only 697 of them returned. The majority of those that were wrecked at that stage were under enemy fire. And every big anniversary, these small ships return to Dunkirk to educate, to remember, and then to sail back to Britain. And there has been so much interest here in Dunkirk and these small ships.
How important is it that we remember Dunkirk?
Incredibly important. 85 years ago, there were 250,000 troops on the beach up there, another 25,000 in the rear guard. None of them knowing whether they were going to live or die, or whether they were going to be rescued, or even if they could be rescued. And based upon what's happening today, we need to remember what happened then, and commemorate that, and celebrate the fact that we still are aware of it, and these boats exist as well. So it's just so important to us.
Lots of these little boats back in the day were only brand new,
yes.
and the Admiralty just took them away and used them.
Yeah.
And the men that were on them didn't necessarily own them, and there was quite a few of them destroyed.
There were 240 of them destroyed over that whole period.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So, some of your thoughts on this HS2 fiasco. Anne says, Nigel, I totally agree with you that the HS2 money would be better spent upgrading our current railways, the point Tom made as well. The whole country would benefit from money being spent this way instead of just a privileged few. Chris says, Nigel, what would we do about the abhorrent scars on the countryside in Southam, Covington and other areas en route? Have to say, I was flying around quite a lot during the recent English county elections, and they have pretty deep, big scars. And finally, Fiona says, the managers were probably paying themselves and consultants massive salaries. I think there's little doubt about that. Now, as you know, there is a desperate need for accommodation for these thousands of young men that cross the English Channel. And, there's the argument about hotels. Well, it doesn't really matter whether you put them in hotels or whether you put them in houses of multiple occupancy. But this one really did make me think. It's in Huddersfield, and we're going to stick with Yorkshire for this whole segment, actually. It was in Huddersfield, and there was some purpose-built student accommodation in Huddersfield. And we can look at the rooms. I mean, this is really high-end, very, very nice accommodation. But the government took out a contract, a lease. They paid £7 million for it. The hope was the centre could take over 700 asylum seekers, and yet it's remained empty for over a year, which I find absolutely, totally astonishing. But let's stick with Yorkshire, shall we? Because this is quite extraordinary. So Wakefield District Health and Care Partnership have entered into an engagement with asylum seeker accommodation hotels, giving migrants, asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, call them what you want, questionnaires to ask them, are they being looked after properly? Are they happy where they are? And some of the answers are really, really illuminating. And by the way, I have to pay credit to Zia Youssef from Reform. This is all part of his Doge project, is to sort of reveal what's going on. Try this for size. One migrant complained there were no cigarettes in the room. Poor baby. Another said, I'd like to be moved nearer to my cousin in Halifax. And another said, I'm struggling here. I have a problem with the food. English food is like beans and things. At home we have different foods. Would be good to have things like rice. God help us. What are we doing? Are we offering these surveys to homeless people who served in the armed forces? Are we hell? Well, Tom, you were a minister involved in this area. The first one, we spend all this money on these big facilities and don't use them. That's back to almost the HS2 problem of procurement and left hand and right hand knowing what they're doing.
Well, that is absurd, and that accommodation should be being occupied, because actually where we've been since the election is the government has had to open hotels to meet the demand of more and more people crossing the channel.
Yeah.
We've seen this 40% increase. The accommodation footprint is getting bigger because the number of arrivals is getting bigger. Now, I support using those cheaper forms of accommodation. All of this is suboptimal, of course it is.
So which ones do you support?
So I think, for example, that rather than having people in hotels, it is better and more cost-effective for the taxpayer for them to be in that student-type accommodation. But actually, the best answer for all of this is to just not have the crossings in the first place. And that's why, personally, I am very much at the point, and I think the public's definitely at this point, of saying that the only way that you are going to resolve this issue is if you detain people on arrival and that you are then able to relocate them to a third country, rather like we were seeking to do with Rwanda. That is the best way of solving this problem.
But you were stopped
totally get the
but when you were in government, Tom, when you were a minister, you said all this, but you were prevented from doing it by human rights lawyers.
I wish that we hadn't had the election. Of course, I wish we hadn't had the election in July and everything that flowed from that. Not least because I genuinely believe that we could have got that partnership.
Not a cat's chance in hell.
And
Not a cat's chance in hell.
Well, there was a legislative basis to do it, and had that not been successful, I would say that we ought to do whatever was necessary to operationalise it.
The supremacy of law was with the European Convention on Human Rights.
And in that case, we should do whatever is necessary,
but you
including leaving it,
I don't believe it,
in order to... Because, fundamentally, no British government is going to go against those key rights that people understandably care very much about. But you cannot have this on immigration.
I don't doubt your sincerity, but I do doubt the sincerity of the colleagues of the last administration. Lloyd, can you see this sort of thing that makes people absolutely go... the poor bloke didn't have fags in his room. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, the Huddersfield thing and the poor procurement is ridiculous. It is frustrating, and that, to me, should be... People in the departments should know that heads roll when things like that happen. Yeah. There's an episode of Yes Minister with hospitals that's a bit like this, about kind of not really being opened, only part being opened. I think on the fags thing, I've got no problem with surveys being done. I've got no problem... And actually, there are surveys done with homeless people about what issues affect them and their health needs. And I've seen that happen in Brighton, and that includes all people who are street homeless. The question is, how do you react to that survey? Do you take that survey and say, we're now going to provide...
The bloke doesn't like the food and wants a packet of fags.
Well, no, he wants to be able to smoke in his room. I don't think he wants a packet of fags.
No, he said there were no cigarettes in the room. Well,
I think that's bad. I think that's bad English. Him saying, I've been told. It says we were told there were no cigarettes in the room. That means you're not allowed to have cigarettes in the room. I think that's fine. People should be able to have the right to complain. Not all of them have come over on boats illegally. Some of these people are illegally here and have claimed asylum through legal routes. There aren't very many of them, but there are some.
There aren't many.
And that's because there aren't many routes to get here.
Well, hang on, we have let 500,000 in since 2016.
We've let 500,000 in.
And we've taken them in from We've taken them in from Ukraine. We've taken them in from...
We've not accepted any refugees and as Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians we accepted as not as classed as refugees. We classed them as a special visa programme. The same with the Hong Kong.
However,
the same with the Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong ones count in the refugee numbers. Of course they do.
No, they don't count in the refugee numbers. Because they were offered a British overseas citizenship pathway, which I think is right to do. But let's just be honest, in the numbers...
But the numbers are huge. We've been incredibly generous.
No, you're quite right, you're quite right. And what we need to be is more circumspect. And as I keep saying on this programme, there are three things that I think there could be cross-party consensus on. One is that we should have overseas processing in France, which is perfectly legal, and other European countries are doing it under the convention.
Which would be a disaster, by the way.
Which would not be a disaster.
Because everybody who fails would get in a small boat and come anyway.
No, because then they arrive and immediately you say, oh, fantastic, into our minibus, we'll take you to our processing centre. Our processing centre is in France. You just constantly move people back. There is no accommodation here in the UK.
It's a novel approach.
That's what should happen. And it's fair, it's fair but friendly and also firm.
I tell you what, under this government, none of it's going to happen. Now, I think I'm probably going to have to give right of reply to Wakefield District Health and Care Partnership, and they say decisions on the future use of accommodation sites will be made in due course, consultation with local authorities and other stakeholders. That's on behalf of the Home Office. And in terms of the lease, well, they say the lease was agreed before the election, but it's all going to happen once they've complied with building regulations, etc. The whole thing's completely unacceptable. In a moment, a slightly lighter segment, but we were going to have a look at Angela Rayner, discuss her performance at the Dispatch Box. Lloyd knows her very, very well. And just for a bit of fun, we'll find out who have been voted the sexiest female and male MPs.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The heat wave across Portugal, Spain and France is going to continue to build for the next couple of days. We're looking at temperatures in the mid to high 30s, possibly 40 Celsius for a few places. And with that heat, there's a risk of some hefty showers across Portugal and Spain. Some thundery downpours are possible. A few showers also possible further east, affecting Italy and into Greece and Turkey. But actually, through the outlook period, as we go towards the weekend, it's looking largely sunny for many and staying pretty hot.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening, I'm here with your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. We are now in a heat wave, and we're going to continue to see these heat wave conditions for some lingering right through the weekend. It's all because, well, high pressure is across us at the moment, and that's bringing a lot of sunshine for many places, and that's leading to some pretty high temperatures of building. But taking a look as we go through tonight, and there's a bit more cloud across some parts of Scotland, central into northern Scotland as well, with a little bit of drizzly rain across far western parts. Away from this though, lots of clear skies and lots of dry weather to be had, and temperatures not dropping a huge amount, so it is going to be a particularly warm night for many places, some places holding up in the high teens Celsius. So it is going to be a fine start to the day for most, and across the bulk of England and Wales, a sunny start, just a bit of cloud towards some eastern parts of England first thing. Heading further north and across Northern Ireland and Northern England, lots of sunshine here through the morning. Meanwhile, for Scotland, a cloudier picture here, particularly across central and western parts, a bit of rain at times. Meanwhile, across the north, away from Orkney and Shetland, where there will be a few showers, many parts of northern and eastern Scotland having a bright start. But that cloud across central parts of Scotland does feed a little bit further northwards, so northern and eastern parts turning a bit cloudier as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere and across the rest of the country, well, it is looking largely sunny, and with that sunshine, temperatures rising a few degrees higher than today. We're looking at highs of around 30 Celsius for some places, so feeling pretty hot indeed. With that hot weather though, there's the risk of some showers, and these are going to affect some western parts as we go through Friday. Can't rule out a bit of thunder, but most of us will avoid these showers, particularly towards the north and east, where it should stay dry and pretty bright, if not sunny. We have higher temperatures forecast for many as we go into the weekend, particularly across central and eastern parts, peaking around 32 or 33.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word. At 9 o'clock tonight, it is, of course, Patrick Christys tonight. He is the star of that show, the boss, the governor. So, Patrick, what's coming up at 9 o'clock?
Well, the governor couldn't do his tie-up properly, could he? But anyway, there we go. Nigel, thank you very much. Loads coming your way. Foreigners are convicted of a quarter of sex offences. I'm going to add that to another story that I've got here. Today, an Afghan asylum seeker was found guilty of raping a 15-year-old girl in Scotland. The excuse they offered there was that in his home country, child marriage was legal. So there was a misunderstanding. And look, I'm just sick of hearing this stuff all the time, right? All the time. But we're going to get that out there. Probably the star guest of the show, Nigel, I think, is James Cleverly, former Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary as well. Why? Well, the Wethersfield RAF base there is being expanded. So all that to go off. And Jeremy Hunt has called for the Lucy Letby case to be re-examined. So what's going on there? And, of course, I'll have all your front pages, 11 p.m. until midnight. It's all go, Nigel. Back to you.
Very good, thank you. I have a feeling, actually, Jeremy Hunt might be right about the Lucy Letby case. I'm just beginning to get more and more doubts about that issue. Now, the Prime Minister, of course, has been in Canada. And when the Prime Minister's not there and Parliament's in session, is the Deputy Prime Minister that takes the reins at the dispatch box. Here she was towards the end of last year when Oliver Dowden was representing the Conservatives and announced he was standing down from the front benches. Here she is in action.
I will miss our exchanges. The battle of the gingers. The late nights voting.
That was her at a previous PMQs. Today, she took a much more sober tone today, and forget the balance of the arguments. I thought generally she was pretty calm today, pretty in charge. She showed at the end, I think, on the damage they're doing to private education, her really hard left-wing views. But it's interesting. She actually, to me, looks much more relaxed at the dispatch box than Keir Starmer. And while she has her brief, she's able to lift her eyes up and actually give a sentence without doing this the whole time, or Rachel Reeves doing this the whole time. And I know, Lloyd, you're a friend of hers, aren't you? You're a personal friend, political friend of hers. And as I say, I'm taking all the politics out of it, but she does in a way look more relaxed at the dispatch box than Starmer.
That's because she's a proper politician.
Go on.
And what I mean by that is politicians...
Are you saying your leader's not?
Well, our leader has really some great qualities, but they are not traditional politician qualities. Traditional politician, in my view, is to understand the people in their area. This is the ancient tradition of what a British politician should be. Yep. They come from a local area and they come to the king and the king's court and they advocate for what the ordinary person is thinking in that area and what they think needs to happen. And they are connected to the ordinary people.
And that's the job of an MP in some ways.
That's the core job of an MP. And then they come to Parliament and they are not people who are saying, let me listen to the experts, let me listen to what all the wonks are saying. There's someone that says, no, what does the ordinary person think about this? OK, of course I want to listen to the expert advice, but my job is to put that in the frame of an ordinary person. Is that palatable to them? Does that sell to them? Does that meet their basic core needs? And she understands that, and she gets that, not only because of her personal life experiences, that we all probably hear too much about politicians' personal lives sometimes, you know, kind of their background. You know, and my father was a toolmaker kind of. But what I think she has is still a down-to-earth touch. If I go out shopping with her or for dinner with her, she gets stopped by ordinary people that are genuinely excited to see her, and she engages with them and she talks with them like an ordinary person. And that, to me, is what a core politician's role is, and she gets it, and that's why she's a good deputy leader.
Does Lloyd have a point?
I have a real grudging respect for Angela, and I always liked her, and we always got on well when we were in Parliament. And I think there's just something very human about her. And she's able to laugh at herself, which is quite a unique quality amongst politicians. And she has got a way of connecting with the public that I don't think the Prime Minister has got. And when you look at what she has achieved and some of the challenges and disadvantages that she's had in her life, it is remarkable. And I think it's actually a very good thing that we've got someone from that working class background in such a senior role in public life. And I just think it stands in a real stark contrast to the Prime Minister, who people just feel often waffles.
Stop the clock. GB News being nice about the Deputy Prime Minister. But as I say, we're not talking politics here, we're talking personal qualities. I think on the politics she really is very, very left-wing. But she's doing well on another score too, because now there is a pretty disreputable website called illicitencounters.com, and they've had a poll who the sexiest members of Parliament are. I think we can see the list on our screen. And Angela Rayner is top for the women, followed by Sarah Pochin of Reform. And for some reason, goodness only knows why, I beat Robert Jenrick as sexiest male politician. Now, I find this completely and utterly and totally extraordinary, but I'm thinking it's probably because it's a disreputable site. Is that the reason, do you think?
People want naughty people on the site, I suspect, and you are seen as a naughty person. But we are in an age of politics, aren't we, where people want people who are not going to just follow the rules, but are people who are going to actually break the mould to get what needs to be done. They see that with Angie. And maybe they see that with you. Well, my team's on one of those, but I want one of the top to win.
Or could it be this clip of me when I was in the jungle and I'm a celebrity, get me out of here?
No.
I'm too sexy for my shirt. You've got to get your shirt off.
I'm sorry. We do a lot of heavy, serious topics on this show, just occasionally. Let's have a bit of fun. Now, back to serious matters. Ones that really matter. The EU reset that Starmer has done, that has harmonised us with EU food rules, means your traditional smoky bacon crisps can no longer be manufactured in this country. The recipe has got to change. Now, I said that in a slightly sarcastic way, but Tom Pursglove just goes to show we will now have to follow all EU rules as they come in on food, drink, shellfish, you name it.
Madness. And we should have seized those opportunities. I feel that the government has really squandered some of that opportunity to go our own way, to get after some of those emerging markets that you and I talked about a lot in the referendum, and that clearly where the future global growth is. And it's a great product. People want to buy smoky bacon crisps. They should be available to do it.
There we are, Lloyd. You've sold out smoky bacon crisps for your party. It's a disgrace.
Well, let's see what the small print of this is. I suspect it will be one particular carcinogen that
it's a recipe change.
They're not happy with. And generally, these safety rules have benefited us. If I can still get my smoky bacon quaver things or those scampi crisps that I particularly like in the pub with a pint, I'll be happy. And I suspect they will continue, just like the Euro sausage and the British sausage, again, of a
We're
famous...
back to, Prime Minister.
It comes around, doesn't it? They're all true, those
But you know what? The more we harmonise with the EU, the more difficult it is to do food trade with the rest of the world.
No, because most of the rules don't preclude things, they don't require things to be in, and most of the rest of the world will allow you to trade with something that has it taken away. They just wouldn't allow you to trade with something that's got it in. So you can trade British beef with America. What you can't have is American hormone beef in Britain. That works, and it works well. And actually Trump said the other day that he wants to move towards more of a British system where you aren't having all these dirty chemicals in their foods that is causing them huge health problems.
It's going to make it much harder to import things from Africa and other parts of the world. Right, fine, enough of that more light-hearted segment. In a minute, well, a report out today, and one that I think really does matter because it comes from the National Energy Systems Operator, NESO, saying that during the upcoming winter of 2025, we're going to be heavily reliant on importing electricity. Would you, Adam and Evit? All of that in just a moment.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
So the National Energy Systems Operator, NESO, so beloved and oft talked about by Ed Miliband, forecasts that there may well be some tight days coming up during the winter of 2025, which basically means the wind won't blow and the sun won't shine, and therefore we will import, on average, during the winter, 11% of our electricity needs via undersea interconnectors, and some days the percentage can be very much more than that. The whole thing seems to be madness, and I wonder why we don't talk about this more. I'm joined down the line by Lord Ridley, science writer and journalist. You know, we've got wind farms going up everywhere, solar farms going up everywhere. Somehow, Lord Ridley, Why are we not having a big debate about the fact that without the importation of power, we literally can't survive?
I think the National Energy Systems Operator intended this announcement to be reassuring. Don't worry, we'll keep the lights on because we can get energy from Norway and France and places like that. But I don't think it's at all reassuring that we're so heavily dependent on other countries. Because for a start, it costs a lot of money. You know, if we're short, they're probably short too, so they're going to charge a lot of money for that electricity. We spent £3 billion last year on importing electricity, up from £1 billion in 2019. So, you know, it's a significant cost. And yes, it probably will prevent the lights going out on these terrible, dangerous days when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, which always happens every winter. But Ed Miliband likes to go on about energy security, and that's why we're building wind farms. But where's the energy security in having no power in the middle of winter?
Do you think that there is a change of attitude coming on this? I mean, it seemed to me, you know, that there are sectors now, businesses now that are beginning to speak out on this because, you know, whatever the rights and wrongs of government policy, I do find it extraordinary that not only do we have to import energy, but our unit cost for industrial users is exactly 4 times that of the USA. Is the business world beginning to wake up to this and say something?
Well, I tell you one company that has woken up to it today, a company in Wigan that makes fiberglass for wind turbine blades. And it's gone out of business because it can't afford the electricity. So there's a terrible irony there. It's the wind turbines that are putting up the price. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Ed Miliband keeps saying wind power is cheap, and they recite this like a sort of mantra. It's just not true. I mean, you know, if you look at all the subsidies going to wind power and all the backup and everything, it's at least twice as expensive onshore and probably nearly 4 times as expensive offshore as gas in the last year or two. Yes, there was a brief period in 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine when gas was more expensive than wind, but it was a very brief period indeed. So there's no doubt that this reliance on unreliables, as I call them, I don't like to call them renewables anymore, this reliance on them has put up our energy prices, as you say, to the highest in the world for industrial users, or at least in the industrialized world, I should say. And that is driving businesses to think very hard about whether they can continue to work in this country. And they need to get their act together and come to government and say, sorry, we don't believe your fantasies anymore.
Well, I'm very much with you on this, as you know, but I'm being told, and perhaps I should sort of, pass it on to you, that I'm being selfish, I'm being small-minded. If we don't pursue these policies, global warming will destroy us all.
Well, global warming is happening. It's a threat. We have to deal with it, but it won't destroy us all. And besides, there's no evidence that solar and wind power are really saving much in the way of emissions at all. Even before you take into account the fact that Britain only produces 0.8% of the world's emissions. Because north of the Alps, a reputable study has found that solar power probably generates less electricity than energy that went into the manufacture of those solar panels over its full 25-year lifespan. Whoa. So, it's crazy, this policy. I wrote an article and claimed that very little solar power is no good in December, and there was a complaint, and IPSO looked into it, and they didn't like the phrase I'd used, which is that solar power produces the square root of sod all in December. Well, eventually IPSO came back and said, actually, that was a justified joke. So I now have it officially true. It's official that solar power produces the square root of sod all in December.
Perfect. Keep upsetting people. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show. Well, that was very entertaining. Lloyd, these net zero fantasies, so beloved by you and your party, they're falling apart, aren't they?
No. There clearly needs to be an adjustment of how we do things. And that 11% imported from France...
That's an average.
France or Norway are nuclear and they are hydro and they are very positive, and we have to be part of the point of being able to be net zero is you're part of a wider grid because, you know, in some places the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, and there is a nuclear backup. Now, the failure that we have is that we have 2 sites that have been identified for nuclear, one in Anglesey, one in Gloucestershire, bought by the last government, and we've not yet committed to building the 3rd and 4th nuclear power station of the old...
Nuclear is not a backup, because nuclear produces constant power. Gas is the backup, because you turn the tap on or you turn the tap off.
In the old system, yes, but in a new system, when you have batteries in domestic places where you are able to use hydrogen, and so therefore you're producing hydrogen via nuclear. And if you look in Finland, where they did a new nuclear power station, rather than the government paying for it, what they said is big industry, get together. If you invest in this, we will fix you then at a very low industrial price for energy. You've then paid for the risk of the nuclear power station, and they got it built. And that's what we should be doing here.
I think you're still in fantasy land. Are you still in fantasy land, Tom?
I've never been in fantasy land on this.
Well, your government was.
I personally
Come on,
think...
the Saudi Arabia of wind. Come on, he was your leader.
There should not be these tight days, and they are a direct result of a policy of self-sabotage. I personally think that we should get on... Hang on a sec. We should definitely get on.
I don't want every day for us to have huge capacity. That would be a waste of money.
But the truth is, we should not be in the desperate straits we are. We should get on and turbocharge nuclear. But also, I take a very pragmatic, hard-headed view about North Sea oil and gas. That should clearly be part of the answer. There's nothing environmentally sensible about importing
What I love about getting people like you on the programme, former ministers in the last government, it seems they disagree with almost everything that the party did in 14 years. Gentlemen, thank you, as ever.
Been a pleasure.
Good-spirited debate on a wide range of subjects. Now, I'm joined by Matt Goodwin in the studio, who will be presenting in a moment State of the Nation. What are you going to debate on that, Matt?
Well, we've got these bombshell migration crime numbers that have just come out through Freedom of Information requests. We're going to be talking to a top expert about that. We've got a new bombshell dossier on Bradford potentially being as bad as Rotherham and Rochdale in the rape gang scandal. We've got the local MP, Robbie Moore, joining us on that.
Yep.
And this new idea, visa penalties for countries that don't take back illegal migrants. We've got a top policy wonk to talk us through how this would work as a policy.
Raised by the Prime Minister just within the last 24 hours. Interesting. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Now, folks, you must excuse me tomorrow because I am going to go to Ascot. Why not? Got to have some fun from time to time. And therefore, whilst I want good weather, I don't want it really to be too hot, as I will be well suited and booted. So let's have a look at the all-important weather forecast from Alex Burkill. You know, sort of...
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. We are now in a heatwave and we're going to continue to see these heatwave conditions for some lingering right through the weekend. It's all because, well, high pressure is across us at the moment and that's bringing a lot of sunshine for many places and that's leading to some pretty high temperatures of building. But taking a look as we go through tonight, and there's a bit more cloud across some parts of Scotland, central into northern Scotland as well, with a little bit of drizzly rain across far western parts. Away from this though, lots of clear skies and lots of dry weather to be had, and temperatures not dropping a huge amount, so it is going to be a particularly warm night for many places, some places holding up in the high teens Celsius. So it is going to be a fine start to the day for most, and across the bulk of England and Wales a sunny start, just a bit of cloud towards some eastern parts of England first thing. Heading further north and across Northern Ireland and Northern England, lots of sunshine here through the morning. Meanwhile, for Scotland, a cloudier picture here, particularly across central and western parts, a bit of rain at times. Meanwhile, across the north, away from Orkney and Shetland, where there will be a few showers, many parts of northern and eastern Scotland having a bright start. But that cloud across central parts of Scotland does feed a little bit further northwards, so northern and eastern parts turning a bit cloudier as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere and across the rest of the country, well, it is looking largely sunny, and with that sunshine, temperatures rising a few degrees higher than today. We're looking at highs of around 30 Celsius for some places, so feeling pretty hot indeed. With that hot weather, though, there's the risk of some showers, and these are going to affect some western parts as we go through Friday. Can't rule out a bit of thunder, but most of us will avoid these showers, particularly towards the north and east, where it should stay dry and pretty bright, if not sunny. We have higher temperatures forecast for many as we go into the weekend, particularly across central and eastern parts, peaking around 32 or 33.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News.